We are going to talk about the main schools of thought in epistemology. When we say school of thought, it is a kind of tradition, or it is a kind of specific kind of view about a certain thing. So in this case, we have different schools of thought, meaning we have different views about what is epistemology. So we will begin with an introduction, and we will look at these four schools of thought in epistemology. We have rationalism, empiricism, pragmatism, and skepticism. Let's begin with an introduction. These are our learning objectives. Number one, we want to identify the major theories in epistemology. And number two, we want to understand the meaning and the implications of each of these theories to our understanding of what knowledge is. Let's just begin with the word epistemology. Epistemology is also known as philosophy of knowledge, or you could also say theory of knowledge. So, when we are talking about epistemology, that is the technical word that we use in philosophy to study the theory of knowledge. The main question of epistemology is this: it seeks to answer the question, what is the nature of knowledge? For us to understand this better, we can say that there are, in general, two opposing traditions in the theory of knowledge. So one is rationalism, the other is empiricism. We can summarize it by saying that rationalism is knowing by thinking, empiricism is knowing through sense experience. The main method of rationalism is the use of logical reasoning or logical arguments or rational arguments. The main method of empiricism is observation and measurement. And we can also say that rationalism is a priori knowledge, empiricism is a posteriori knowledge. We will discuss this in more detail now. Let's begin with rationalism. We can summarize rationalism as knowing by thinking. I will explain this, but before I do that, I just want to introduce you to some philosophers who are part of this school of thought in epistemology. You have Rene Descartes, and this would be some of his writings related to epistemology. You have Baruch Spinoza, also a rationalist. You have Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz, also a rationalist. So these three philosophers view knowledge as rationalism. So what does that mean? According to rationalism, the way to attain knowledge is to rely on the resources of logic and the intellect. What this means is that rationalists believe that when we are born, we are already born with the ability to know. It is kind of like embedded in our brains. The knowledge that we have is already there, and it just so happened that as we grow and as we mature as people, we gain or we get to have access to the knowledge that is already in our minds. So, rationalism is saying that knowledge does not depend on observation. Instead, knowledge comes from basic truths, and we are able to know these truths even if we do not have experience of these truths. This is the reason why another name for rationalism is a priori knowledge. A priori is a Latin word. Translated to English, it means before experience. If you notice, you will see the word there, prior. Okay, prior, when you say something is prior, it means it happens before. So according to this idea, rationalism is a kind of knowledge that is a priori. We do not need to experience in order for us to know or in order for us to have knowledge. Examples? When you see 1 plus 1 equals 2, according to this idea, you do not need to experience this. Your mind can simply understand it. So there is no need for experience to have this kind of knowledge. You are just using your logical reasoning. Or, in other words, you are just using your common sense. Just by the use of your intellect, just by the use of your mind, you are able to know these things. When somebody says nothing can both be and not be at the same time, this is just logical reasoning. This is just an exercise of your intellect, an exercise of your logical reasoning. You do not need experience to know this. This is what the rationalists are saying. There are no square circles. Okay? Just by analyzing this statement, just with your mind, just with your logical reasoning, just with your common sense, you are able to know this. You don't need experience in order to know these things. So therefore, rationalism is characterized by what is called a priori knowledge. When your knowledge is a priori, you do not need facts about the world in order to know something. These kinds of knowledge are just based on logic. You just use your common sense. You do not need evidence in order to be able to know things. So here are some of the key features of rationalism. So number one, basically the method of rationalism is the use of deductive reasoning. I am going to explain this in a later lecture. We will see the difference between deduction and induction. And rationalism says that there is only one correct account of reality. There is only one explanation for certain phenomena. So there is only one truth, there is only one correct answer. This is what rational. Also, like mathematics, there is no room for more or less answers with rationalism. And rationalism is also against the idea of pluralism, the idea that there are many different ways by which we can explain reality. Rationalism is saying there is only one answer, there is only one truth, there is only one explanation.